So here we have the United Nations in Geneva, the Planetary Heart Centre, in fact. And of course, the main United Nations is based in New York City. And I've written quite a bit about the United Nations over the years. You can find plenty of articles on my website about it. And I've also written a lot about the nations. It's about 5 volumes of books of Destiny of the Nations and Races and Nations. The last one being having been released recently, which is in fact about the whole 3 years of pandemic and lockdown. A lot of these books have their inspiration and quotations from this book by Alice Bailey here, The Destiny of the Nation. A fairly small book, but packed with lots of information, some of which I'll be quoting today. I like to sometimes call it the density of the nations, given the fact that some nations just find it very difficult to wake up to their true soul purpose. Of course, all of us contribute to that soul purpose in one way or another, depending on what nation that we're part of. And so each nation, as you know, is ruled by a ray, soul ray and a personality ray, as well as the zodiac sign at the soul level and at the personality level. This is just the personality and soul rays for a smattering of countries: India, China, Germany, France, etc. We won't read out all these ray qualities, but they're there if you want to come back and examine this. And of course, the national motto for each nation is here as well. India, I hide the light. China, I indicate the way. Italy, I carve the paths. So cities and nations evolve as individuals do. And these individuals, of course, and groups are living and evolving within those nations. Our growth is their growth and vice versa, one organism. We ourselves within the greater body of the planet, of course, but also of our specific nation that we actually have national karma with too, quite often. So there's a ray psychology of nations, and it's important to understand that ray psychology, to understand the change that is going on. And I frequently discuss this in my newsletters when applying these ageless wisdom teachings to the consideration of any nation. I quite often write about USA, and a lot of people think I'm beating up on the USA, but I'm not. I actually love the place. But I have written, if you'll go to the search by subject tab on my website, esotericastrologer.org, you'll find many essays on the nations, divided up into a general section, and then specific sections on France, Britain, USA, etc. Humanity is realizing its connectedness with the rest of the world. World events can be seen via satellite, of course, and in the Amazon jungle, for instance, the same day, such as the connectivity, which has been around since the 90s, but now is really evolved to a much greater degree through increased technology and so forth. So this diagram you may be familiar with. It's one of the diagrams I had made for the 5 planetary centers and the jurisdiction of these planetary centers to certain continents. For instance, New York City here, and where my mouse is circling here. And you see London here is extensive to the whole British Empire, from Canada up here, all the way through to Australia, New Zealand, India, and of course, various islands in the Caribbean. Then you have Geneva, the Heart Centre, which extends over all of Europe, even right out towards the edge of Turkey there, and all of Russia. Extraordinary. Then you have Darjeeling which covers India and Central Asia. Not many of us know much about Central Asia. I'm going to mention it later on today. And then we have Tokyo for the Far East. This whole section here, Indonesia, down towards Australia, right up to the top of the Arctic Circle. So these are the 5 planetary inlets, of course, that we direct energy through. And you'll notice, of course, that the energy is emanating from the sign of the zodiac. Gemini here, for instance, passes through Gemini Britain being a Gemini soul, and London being ruled by Gemini at one level too. So just to remind ourselves of that. Of course, another way to look at the 5 planetary centers in this 5-pointed star, which has the chakra which it represents, the rays, Darjeeling, for instance, the head chakra, second ray of soul, 5th ray personality, Scorpio, Mars, and Pluto. Scorpio, ruled by Mars and Pluto, and the first ray comes through that center. Humanity is just starting to understand karma, the law of cause and effect, action and reaction, and had to learn this before it learns the concept of reincarnation. So these world events are reminders about how apathy to the rest of the world. Energy is impartial and has to be released somewhere as individuals, nations struggle with their relationship. Relationships are about the ebbing and flowing of energy over the planet, conditioned by astroradiological forces as well as constellations and stars. When we work out ray astrological qualities of nations and cities, we, 1, get an idea of karma being worked out. 2, understand the evolutionary goal of a nation. And 3, stage on the path of that nation. And 4, clues to our own ray makeup and what we gravitate toward or resonate with. As I said before, there can be national karma that can override our personal karma. And the Tibetan does give stages on the path for some countries. It talks about Brazil, for instance, on the path of probation, I think it is, and a few other nations like Austria and Germany in various parts. I may have it further on here in this discussion. So here we have the soul and personality zodiac signs. For instance, Aries. We have countries, Germany, India, South Africa, and Switzerland, all have Aries soul. Canada, China, and Poland all have Taurus soul energy. And when I think of it, Moscow in Russia is ruled by Taurus at the soul level as well. He doesn't give all the cities of the world, but he gives quite a few that are ruled with their soul and personality zodiac rulers. Brazil at the soul level ruled by, Leo rules Brazil, Italy, and Romania at the soul level, France and Russia at the personality level, and so on. Aquarius, as I've said many times in my newsletters, is the soul energy of Holland or the Netherlands, Russia, and the USA. So there are 4 different categories of ideas in the world today. 1, ancient inherited ideas controlling the racial life for centuries, where the aggression, possession because of individual or state authority, selfish ambition, violently imposed authority. And because it's so old, a lot of these places or areas have developed crystallized thought forms, like dark energy spots around the planet that have to be cleansed. One of them DK does describe to us, which I may mention later, which is over the Middle East, and Southern Europe. Two, ideas which are relatively new, such as Nazism, fascism, communism. The state matters, but the individual doesn't, all for the general good. And we're seeing a lot of that around at the moment. Totalitarianism could be a word that covers a few of these ideologies. Three, democracy, ideally where the people govern. Government represents the will of the people. Now, what we're seeing, particularly in the last few years, is an abuse by government everywhere, overriding the will of the people, not consulting people. And there's democracy has taken a bit of a dive considering its good development over the last couple of centuries. And but of course, these things ebb and flow in cycles. Currently, we're in a trough, I think, and we'll move towards another peak again on the graph of cycles. Four, a world state divided into great sections for the inclusively minded. The world is headed that way in spite of differing ideologies. The world state has potential for evil as well as good. And this is another thing that's happening currently. Various factions are trying to create a world state on this planet, mainly selfishly motivated. In my opinion, my humble opinion, my IMHO, by the time countries have arrived at that stage, they would have eradicated most of their evil. So when countries truly arrive at this state of this world state, or this this arrangement of blocks of countries, and the Tibet has a fair bit to say about blocks, B-L-O-C, block, and that we're not really ready for them yet, but there are blocks emerging now. For instance, Russia, China, and Brazil and India, the BRICS countries, so-called BRICS bloc. And we've had the European community, which the British tried to pull out of, but have now acknowledged was total failure. Even the pro-Brexiters have said this, apparently. So, but these blocks, whether they're ideological, politically ideological, or economic, they're all parts of the jigsaw puzzle of the world state. That eventually in the Aquarian age, in the next 2,000 years, it's quite possible that the world will be of one heart and one mind, so to speak, in terms of one political system, one monetary system. Of course, what's happening now is that many selfish forces are trying to preempt that in a way that is not, hasn't been decided by the rest of humanity. So in a way, it's a good wake-up call for humanity to consider the fact that they must have input and make decisions about this in democratic systems. They say that democracy is a second-ray love-wisdom system, and leading nations that promoted democracy, like the USA and Britain, are second-ray souls. Communism is more on the third ray, and of course, China is a third-ray personality. Fascism is more on the first ray, will of power, and so forth. Point 5, as far as these major ideas, is the spiritual hierarchy. That's an idea that's only just been released to the world from the time of Blavatsky in the 1880s, alerting to the world of the fact that the hierarchy exists. Spiritual hierarchy governing the peoples of the world embodies the best elements of monarchy, democracy, totalitarianism, and communism. Would you believe that there's a little bit of good in all these things? Rightly used, of course. All have much latent beauty, strength, and wisdom. And the hierarchy are poised to return amongst humanity for the first time in a long time, dare I say millions of years. And will help bring about the restoration of this ancient Atlantean control that they had back in Atlantis during this Aquarian age, this Aquarian cycle of 2,000 odd years. So currently we're in a world chaos between the two ages of Pisces and Aquarius. There's much instability as we go from one zodiacal sign to another. Wavering ideologies, persecutions, hatreds, war, world anxiety, terror. This is the superficial temporal picture. We must always bear that in mind when we may get disappointed and depressed about what we see on the news. The ray of harmony through conflict, the major ray that rules humanity, is always at work. And so despite all the conflicts we see around us, there is a great learning taking place and discrimination as well. So we're going through this revolution of consciousness during this cuspal period, which is about 500 years between the age of Pisces and Aquarius. So we have different ray qualities that are influencing us. The first ray of will of power, whose symbol is the sword, manifests as the will of God in world affairs, the will to good, regular, rhythmic progression toward unity and synthesis globally, ruled by Vulcan, the smithy, who forges the sword. B, the destructive element in world affairs, humanity and use of force of will, self-assertion, war, selfishness, disease, death. This is Pluto, the destroyer. This is also Kali. Pluto is Kali, the goddess Kali, who presides over the Kali Yuga cycle that we are in for this fifth root race. We know the first ray comes through Shambhala, the place where Sonic Kamara, the personality expression about planetary logos, angers his energy. And this is only being used, well, I've got 3 times here, but actually 5 times, maybe 6 times in the next couple of years. The first time at individualization, back in Lemuria, second time during the war in heaven in Atlantis, so it's called sometimes, and thirdly, the World Wars 1 and 2, and 1975 and 2000 can be added on as sort of mini Shambhala impacts as well, the first ray. In 2025 may well see another one, which I believe we're in already, if that is possible. The first ray expresses itself in a twofold manner through humanity. A, through powerful dominating personalities in political, social, religious, educational areas. Their aim is for the general good. Quite often the power is misapplied through limited personalities. So you have the ruthlessness and cruelty of a Hitler or a Stalin, these first ray exponents of force. Often misunderstood and hated because of the misuse of energy, and they utilize it within desired limits of the immediate plan. First ray's disciples' lot is difficult. Powerful, headstrong and cruel. They impose their will and dictate to others. Not all of them are, of course. The Tibetan does discuss Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a first ray disciple who did much for USA. B, the voice of the massed humanity, expressed through sound, as love is expressed through light. It's that sound of the cry for freedom. The sound that demands peace and understanding, the non-allowance of drastic events to take place. Here is the second ray of love wisdom, the Christ ray, coming through hierarchy that seeks to blend with the first ray Shambhala energy by tempering destruction of the past and aid with reconstruction. The second range is mainly concentrated through the new group of world service, world disciples and initiates and idealists and servers who express the upliftment of humanity. Love wisdom can express itself through them. They too are frequently misunderstood. Interesting. The love they express isn't sentimental or affectionate. It's not the warm, touchy-feely kind of thing. It's concerned with the group whole and not an individual's petty interest. Quite often it can come across as detached and impersonal. And the Tibetan has many good quotes throughout his book about what impersonality means. Many people think it's a cold, dry thing, which it can seem to be, but quite often it's not. It's more to do with love, wisdom. Through them, the hierarchy can bring about changes through these kind of groups. The new group of world servers, second way working through that group, the NGWS as we call it. The Tibetan tells us that 4 problems will be solved in the next 2 centuries. 1, territorial possession, the group correspondence within the family of nations to the materiality of the individual. Think about the countless wars that have been fought just over territory, the inability of human beings to share with each other. This is mine. One of the first things a baby says when it's, after a few months, mine. And here we see a good example of Israel and the diminishment of the land over a period of time from 1946 to 2000, where the white areas represent, the dark areas represent the original Palestinian land, and the white areas the Jewish land. And now it's gone from one phase here in 1946 to the opposite, completely reversed, 2000. The second problem to be solved is sex, the true understanding of the law of attraction, which will be, I think it's the last class of the 4th semester actually. 3, death, the subjective, objective, tangible, the intangible, the life, the form, will be solved in the realm of psychology. Interesting. Exoteric and esoteric psychology. Of course, there are many, many good books on death that you can find. Hundreds, if not thousands. Right. Just a note, I noticed that quite a few people have come late to this class. It does start on the hour and the time that you've been given. Also, several people turned up during the meditation after repeated calls for you to come on time, please. Just to mention that. Can you please bear this in mind for the next term? Another good meditation is simply looking at a world map. The vastness of the continents and of course the oceans. There's more oceans than there are continents, we're told. These flat maps, I think I mentioned last week, tend to distort the size of the actual continent. For instance, India looks quite small here. It's apparently is much bigger than that. For me, pondering the world map or a globe of the planet, it's always a marvelous thing to do, to really get your imagination going, wondering about a particular culture, and of course traveling to that. Materialism, someone said, yes, the 4th notion, maybe. All nations are controlled by the personality ray. This is a fact. Hardly any nations are controlled by the soul ray yet, but of course have had their moments in the sun, so to speak, in expressing their soul. France, Britain, USA, Italy, many nations, but no nation is yet fully controlled by the soul ray. Soul ray is sensed by a few by a few of the more advanced in any nation. And I've prepared this class a long time ago when Gorbachev was around. So I gave him as an example of someone who presided over perestroika and who I regarded in fact as a disciple, despite revisionist history about him now. So we have the Russian Seventh Ray, the reorganizing and restructuring, which is what perestroika was all about. So the work of the new group of world servers is to evoke the soul ray in any nation into increasing functioning. And this is an important point that we covered in the conference back in Aries that the Aquarian Wisdom Center hosted. The talks and the material is still all available on our website. And the talks, there were some very good talks that are worth going through and listening to. On Russia, on many nations. But there are other groups around, meditation groups, who meet regularly to invoke the souls of nations. One of them is called Nations Lab, that my friend Utgave presides over, and Sasha. And in an endeavor to really subjectively wake up the souls of those nations. So I just remember the point I was trying to make before, and that is that sometimes the personality, or often the personality issues or integration issues of any nation are almost so insoluble that the only way that they can be really solved is to invoke the soul of the nation to really help bring about alignment or integration of the personality. Britain is a first-rate personality, exponent of the art of control, and can be very controlling, of course. It's really trying to hang on to its power at the moment. It's blameless sort of reach that it's had around the world, but her function was to produce the first tentative grouping of federated nations that the world has seen as an advanced national soul. That was part of her brief. And she did that, albeit imperfectly. When we look back on the slave trade, which all European nations were involved in, by the way, hardly any were exempt from that. And of course, that trade is still going on behind the scenes, bigger than it was then. And Britain's first-rate personality links with India's first-rate soul. And many British, we're told, are linked subjectively with India from past incarnations and association. So the quarrel between India and Britain is a family affair in the deepest sense of the term. Look how many Indian people we have in the British Parliament now. Rishi Sunak, and many other posts in the government are held by people of Indian origin. So there's a great blending of cultures that's taking place. And this is certainly par for the course for Britain as a second-rate soul to help blend. That's what the second ray does. It blends and synthesizes. So does the first ray, but in a different way. And so, and this, of course, has happened in many nations now. We have over 220 ethnic minorities in Australia now, and pretty much in many other nations. So quarrel equals conflict, and the fourth ray, harmony through conflict, indirectly affects Great Britain's second ray, love, wisdom, soul, linking with India's personality, which is a fourth ray personality. These are just a few examples of thousands that you can find. So there is much to unpack by students in the next couple of centuries for this material that DK has given out. It can't possibly be unpacked now, even with huge teams of esoteric students doing this work. But it is the basis of national psychology, ray psychology, and astrology in the future. Germany's first ray personality was quite sympathetic to the British in World War II, so much so that Hitler was reluctant to fight because he admired the British, we're told. Great Britain represents an ideal of intelligent government and loving understanding. London is ruled by Libra. Libra, of course, is the law. But the first ray is very much about the application of the law, the rule of law is a great first ray expression. Libra is a good qualifying influence in that first ray because it's about fairness and justice. So some nations are feminine and others are masculine. For instance, in India, France, USA, Russia, and Brazil are all feminine nations. Some of them you may not think would be feminine, but this also is something that requires some reflection upon and study, exoteric study of the characteristics of these nations. The feminine nations constitute the nurturing mother aspect. They are feminine in psychology, intuitive, mystical, alluring, beautiful, fond of display and colour. Of course, Brazil is a great example of that at Carnivale. Negatively, feminine countries are over-materialistic, too fond of pageantry and are possessive and money-focused. But they mother and nurture civilization and ideas. Masculine nations, on the other hand, we have China, Germany, Great Britain, Italy. Now you'll notice that it doesn't, even though we can call, say, the first ray line the masculine line and the second ray line the feminine line, it doesn't really apply in this case. You can see in the feminine nations, we have plenty of first ray, fifth ray, seventh ray, and in the masculine nations, we have first ray as well. Probably a little bit more predominant, but not much. So this masculine feminine quality is in a sense almost beyond the rays. Masculine nations are political, governing, standardizing, group conscious, or occult. They're not mystical. They're aggressive and full of grandeur, interested in law, laying emphasis on race and empire. Hence Great Britain, for instance, rule Britannia. And because that subjective body that was created by Britain is now breaking up, that is what Britain is trying to lamely hang on to. Its glorious colonial past, and other nations in Europe as well, or even outside Europe for that matter. Masculine nations are more inclusive, think in wider terms than feminine countries. Interesting correspondences there. A lot to reflect upon. Zodiacal signs of countries are determined by the destiny, or the future, and the karma, past, of humanity as nationalities living in different territories. Over centuries, nations are born several times. They take different incarnations. They change their personality ray. Capital cities and decisions made there reflect the immediate response of populations in nations. Some nations are fluid and integrated, others are integrated entities, or fully expressing personalities. Others are crystallized and have nearly run their course as personalities. DK tells us that Capricorn in nations is a good sign of that crystallization. Others are coming under their soul ray, and others are purely embryonic. Now, I've got this map here because I know that most people have no idea of what countries are in Central Asia, kind of just like some vague sort of many countries ending with the suffix "stan." Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And yet some of these countries, like Kazakhstan, are enormous. And I'm showing you here a global map. That dark area there is Kazakhstan. It's about as big as Europe. You look at Europe over here to the left, and it only has 20 million people in it. And here's a picture of one of its capital cities and various sculptures and buildings and so forth. And you'll see that it borders, of course, Russia, the Black Sea over here, and China over on this side. Fascinating area. We are told that the Christ actually lives in Central Asia. This area is known as Central Asia. Might have mentioned that in a past class. So to give you an idea of, people live in their countries in bubbles and have no idea of other cultures, of what exists, unless they travel, of course. And this area is really opening up now. It's very exciting to see these different cultures emerging. So, just a small example there of areas that we're barely aware of. And look at this huge expanse, of course, of Siberia and Russia. And a lot of very ancient nations apparently used to live in this area. So here we have another list of nations from A to Z and their various soul and personality rulerships. Similar to the other list I showed you before, but with all of them included. Too many to go through, of course. And DK never gave all the personality and soul rays for all the nations. So to the right here, we have 2 columns of soul and personality rays, but the blank ones have not been given. For Australia, for instance, Virgo Capricorn, soul and personality, but have left it to us to guess what rays that nation may be, and likewise with probably half the nations on this list, actually. But we have been given a great gift to study these signs and apply them to the countries, or vice versa, in coming to a deeper understanding. So whatever nation that you're part of that national psyche or consciousness. And so it's worth knowing at least the soul and personality signs and rays to figure out how you play your part within the national karma. Great Britain is a Gemini soul with a Taurus personality. Written a lot about this country, of course. You can find my various articles in my books as well, of course. And London is a Leo soul with a Libra personality and has rays ruling it, just as the whole nation has rays and zodiac signs ruling it. And London, of course, is one of the 5 major planetary centers, so it's extremely important. Its 5th ray soul concerns the 5th root rays, and the fact that London I propose as being the throat chakra of the planet, where the ideas and the level of consciousness in Britain is in fact broadcast around the world subjectively. So with these signs and rays ruling it, we have the principles of multiplicity, Gemini, and integration, Libra, in both the Gemini soul of the nation and the Libra personality of London. We have duality of Gemini and the triplicity of England, Scotland, and Wales and the differentiation and conditioning aspects of the entire empire. We have more people from some of these parts of Britain in various parts of other nations. For instance, the Irish are big on the east coast of USA, New York City and so forth. And you have strong Scot in New Zealand and Australia. And that triplicity of those nations, England, Scotland and Wales, embodies different ray qualities. England, well, you could say the first ray, but mainly the second ray. Scotland, the third ray, and Wales, the fourth ray, are their main conditioning energies. The Taurus personality of Great Britain is a big problem. I've written about this several times. I can see the real crystallization and stubbornness, the negative aspect of Taurus there. It's avariciousness, it's materialistic, greedy side. Anyway, no nation is perfect, and so I'm not picking on Britain. And the Gemini influence also is responsible for the constant movement and restlessness of the British. As they crossed and recrossed the ocean to all ends of the earth, very characteristic. Gemini influence from Mercury, Mercury being the ruler of Gemini. And I've mentioned this many times too, gave the British being adept at secrecy and deviousness and diplomacy and subtlety in politics. I mentioned the hilarious TV show called Yes, Prime Minister. If you've never seen it, it's probably available on YouTube these days. And some very witty humor in that. Also, of course, organizations like MI5, MI6, who are still very strong influence around the world, of course, not just in Britain. The Mercury influence is also related to film and drama, soap operas, theatre, Shakespeare, etc. Many Romans or Italians are now incarnate as Britons. That they have a similar relationship as the Indians to Britain. And of course, the Romans were the great road builders, and the British were the great rail builders. Gemini, of course, rules transport. You see the diagram to the left here of the engineering that went into building Roman roads. Very sophisticated, and many of which still remain today. Also, the rivalry between the Italians and, well, of the British in general with their soccer games, and the rivalry amongst all the other European nations is well known. The sixth ray Mars element, or the tribal element of the so-called soccer hooligans who are out sprawling for a fight at the soccer stadium, whether it's in Britain or in Brussels or in Italy. There's that strong, and hence, of course, the importance of sport as a way of transcending violence, of diffusing the of aggression, directing it in a constructive way. That, in fact, sport is a great bringing together of people and helping to bring about a fusion of cultures, generally speaking. But there is still that strong old Roman warrior spirit in Britain that you see at the soccer game. The second ray soul of Britain is not yet in control, according to the Tibetan. That he wrote that, of course, almost a century ago, but I think it's still true. Nations take a while to develop. I think I mentioned in one of the root race classes that a nation takes 2,000 to 4,000 years as it's like the flower on the root race tree to really develop. And Britain is only maybe 2,000 years old at the moment, so it's got a ways to go yet. London is ruled by Leo at the soul level and assists France's Leo personality, and France's Pisces soul will assist Germany's Pisces personality likewise. See, all this sort of symmetry between these nations is very important. Libra, the personality ruler of London, dominates, but not Leo, although Leo is working more subjectively, I think. Leo is this, this kind of rule Britannia. Leo is the lions, the iron lions in Trafalgar Square, which I've got a picture of here further on. London's Libra personality, Britain regards herself as the preserver of the balance of power among nations. That word balance, of course, relates to Libra. Britain being the one to mete out justice. That's again another theme of Libra, and indicate right methods of law and order. Again, Libra themes. Gemini nature sometimes offsets this, while the Taurus personality frequently blinds to the real issue. London's Leo soul links Berlin's Leo personality and forms a triangle with Paris, France being a Leo personality. So there are many, many of these relationships, and I've commented upon a lot of them in my newsletters over the years. And there's that lion, Trafalgar Square. I think they were all made by the 4 major ones in the square pattern, I think, around the fountain. And I think they were made from the melted down cannons of past wars. Of course, there's been Big Ben in the background. Lions are also big in St. Petersburg. I think I mentioned that in a particular newsletter. So the British Empire, as I mentioned before, this little square down here, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, South Africa were the main 5 nations as part of the British Empire, with all varying zodiac signs, and only one of them, India, has been given the rate of being given a first-rate soul, fourth-rate personality. But I think many of these countries are probably second-rate souls. I think Australia and Canada and New Zealand are. I'm not sure about South Africa. But I might be wrong. These are just my speculations. Other people concur with it, but other people have other speculations. All are related to Great Britain through the planetary rulers. For example, Australia, Taurus moon in the exoteric Australia chart anyway, and Britain's Taurus personality. We need to distinguish between the horoscope of a territory housing the nation, because it's not true esoteric horoscope. We don't know those yet. Well, we do in a sense. For instance, if we erect the Australian horoscope with a Virgo Sol Capricorn rising, then we have Virgo at the ascendant at the 9 o'clock position. And therefore the Capricorn sun would fall in the 5th house. And so that gives at least a basis to start. I did discuss this in my first Destiny of the Nations book, Volume 1. And when you look at the house position, a sun in the 5th house behaves very much like a Leo. It has a lot of Leo characteristics. So anyway, that's just one example. We are told by the Tibetan that Sydney in Australia is the solar plexus center of the British Empire, London is the heart. Ottawa in Canada is the throat. These are three major centres of the British Empire. So even though that objective body has gained independence and so forth, and secession or withdrawal, the subjective body still remains of the original purpose of why these federated nations came together, of the first experiment in federating nations, by the hierarchy, no doubt. Also Johannesburg, Toronto, Vancouver, a subsidiary city, the Tibetan mentions of Calcutta, Delhi, Singapore, Jamaica, Madras, and maybe Hong Kong too. So every city is a chakra of some kind in one nation or another. We've been given the ones for the USA, for instance. Although New York is an international centre, projected to be the Ajna centre of the planet, the national role that it plays is the throat centre. Chicago, the solar plexus, Los Angeles, the heart, and so forth. That information has been given out in the blue books. So we have two major divisions of the East and the West, or the Occident and the Orient, and they're linked by the fourth ray being the common ray between them, because the Occident or the West is a second ray of soul, fourth ray personality. The Orient or the East is a fourth ray of soul and a third ray personality. The fourth ray is the one in common, which happens to be, of course, the ray of humanity as a whole. Japan is an important link between East and West. It's very westernized in many ways, and is probably more advanced as a nation than China. It's a very Zen nation in many ways in terms of its compactness, its essentialization, and its very rich culture. Of course, China has a very rich culture too, of course, and is catching up quickly, as are all the Asian nations. Korea, of course, notably South Korea. So this indicates eventual understanding once this fourth ray in common indicates an eventual understanding once the second ray Occident becomes the dominant factor. So we're in a second ray solar system too, of course. So love, wisdom has to underlie all relations, in other words. In this particular triangular formation, the up-pointing triangle and the down-pointing triangle, it's very esoteric and is based upon some of DK's writings. We have Darjeeling, the head centre, London, the throat, in this particular combination, New York, the ajna, and note how New York plays a linking role between the two triangles. Geneva, the heart, Tokyo, the solar plexus. Well, you have been all very quiet today, I must say. I will continue. We have a few minutes left. This is an important one. I may have mentioned in another class about the national angel. Well-established nations are presided over by national devas, or the thrones as they're called in the ancient Christian term. They work with advanced souls of humanity and occasionally send impulses to personalities acting in a manner that will fulfill their dharma. The national angel is a summation of the whole of national consciousness. All our souls are united with it. The national karma, dharma, and consciousness meet and find a single expression of consciousness in the archangel. Under the laws of karma, a national angel is granted a certain amount of latitude, control in the working out of the nation's karma. They can concentrate it so that sections are paid off quickly or extended over long periods. Prolong the agony yoga. There is a complete knowledge by the angel of a nation's capacity to endure adversity, the amount of adverse karma it is capable of bearing without suffering serious evolutionary delay. It's good to be reminded of these passages, because I doubt if any of us really think about the national angel. I know that some of the nations groups have mentioned recently the getting in touch with the national angel. Of course, the work in the Aquarian age is becoming far more aware of the daily kingdom and of working consciously with them. Now you see the statue to the left here. We have this, I'm not quite sure which angel this is. Looks like a goddess of some sort. Maybe it's Bodhisattva or someone. But you see many of these statues in all the old cities of Europe and beyond, that some of them are very esoteric, highly symbolic, really worth noting. France, Britain, all throughout Europe, Italy, of course. National karma. The Industrial Revolution in Europe is a painting of 19th century, I think, London, or some other. No, it is London, I think. It's the Thames. And the smoke and pollution there was shocking back in the 18th century because of industry, the Industrial Revolution. But all through Britain, there was the revolution going on with the cotton mills in the north and coal mining and railways being built and so forth. So we have Vulcan, the smithy, at his forge, hammering away at his forge, the first ray energy of Vulcan involved in this, and of course being the personality ruler of Britain. But you have various of these periods that I outline in my books and on the web that have influenced humanity, particularly Europe, of course, throughout the ages. We have the European Renaissance from 1425 to the 1700s, ruled by Ray III of active intelligence, which came in about 1425. Okay, and so that age of enlightenment, Rays 3, 2, and 7 were all very strong at that time. Ray 2 came in on a very strong cycle in 1575. Some great musicians came in at that time as well. Ray 7 came in 1675, and so forth. So this added to the intellectual flowering. This was like a repeat of the golden age of Greece, a couple of thousand years before. Industrial Revolution, 1750 to 1850 roughly, that 1 century. Changes in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, transportation, technology had a profound effect on social, economic and cultural conditions. Ray 3, Ray 5, Ray 1. Of course, Uranus, the planet of science, discovered in the middle of it all, 1781, just a few years after the Ray 5 of concrete science came in 1775, which in fact was shortened in its incarnation because of some of the more materialistic sort of, events that occurred, put it that way, during that time. Some of the collateral damage, if you like, the fifth ray was withdrawn around about 1999. So then we have the technology revolution, 1850s to 1920s, the so-called second industrial revolution, and now we're in the so-called fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, 1975 to now, the invention of computers. And so in terms of the speed of evolution, we have that spiral again. The higher up the spiral, the faster it goes. So what can be achieved in 50 years previously is achieved in 10 years, that kind of thing. And we're still in that spiral. And we almost can't keep up. And this is why so many people have concerns about AI technology, artificial intelligence, because we can't keep up with the legislation for controlling it, and where it can be misused and abused, which it already is, we're told. When the fourth ray, this is the one I was talking about before, when the fourth ray of harmony through conflict is the energy expressing itself through the soul, the indications are that that the country concerned is nearing the path of discipleship or the path of privation. Austria and Germany are nearing the path of discipleship, therefore, both of them fourth ray soul. Brazil is on the path of probation and will rapidly move forward. Austria is nearer true discipleship than Germany, and spiritually, Austria has much eventually to give. Interesting. France is a Pisces Leo country and is expressive egoically of the fifth ray of concrete knowledge of science and the personality ray of active intelligence. The soul of France subjectively ruled Europe for the most important and influential part of the Piscean age. Now passing out, she colored and dominated by her Leo personality a large part of the happenings in Europe during the Middle Ages and for centuries. She mediated the Piscean quality to the civilization of the then known world and her definitely Leo personality, self-conscious, self-centered, brilliantly intelligent and individual, and that conditioned Europe. So all these countries are advanced souls or souls on the path, or at least, and have contributed to their soul purpose considerably in several cases to the world, but have also, their imperfections have also created problems, as it is with all human individuals, of course. What way can, Rachel says, in what way can national karma override personal karma? Being called up to war, being enlisted into the army, or drafted into the army. And a lot of this happened in World War II and World War One. So, of course, but interesting enough, in situations like that, much personal karma can also be worked off under the umbrella of national karma. Daniel says, are national devas risen out of the current population or predetermined? I'm not quite sure, to be quite honest. I could say both in some ways. There are many, many legions of angels and archangels that are responsible for so many things in the world that we are not even aware of. All many in the different kingdoms of nature, in the human kingdom as well, of course, as guides and so forth. And so perhaps in terms of nations, they are appointed, in other words, predetermined. But also the national angel grows and evolves on its own level through its interaction with the population and vice versa. This is how the creative hierarchies of astrology work. The creative hierarchies are, in fact, the zodiac signs, which are groups of these angelic beings that condition humanity and also grow and evolve on their own level through their interaction with humanity. Right. I think it's Daniel again. Would national devas manifest when a country reaches a certain evolutionary or stage, or waiting for a certain individual to evolve to hold their monad? Possibly. I think from the outset or establishment of any nation, there's going to be the national angel is going to be invoked or assigned.